All right, let's jump right into this explainer and build a complete, bulletproof academic blueprint to help you absolutely master a 10-mark exam question on the elements of listening. If you're studying English language teaching, you already know that listening is this massive, sometimes completely overwhelming topic. But when you're sitting there faced with a totally blank exam paper, how do you synthesize all of that complex theory into a high-scoring answer? You know, the kind that proves you know exactly what you're talking about. Well, that is exactly what we're going to crack today. We're going to narrate in detail so you can tackle those broad, daunting 10-mark questions with absolute confidence. To build a complete answer that practically demands top marks, you need a meticulous, memorable structure that covers exactly what happens before, during, and after a learner listens. Listen, you can't just throw scattered facts onto the page and pray something sticks. That's a surefire way to lose points. What you need is a narrative. You have to show the examiner that you deeply understand the underlying mechanics, the very real classroom challenges, and the intricate cognitive processes behind this crucial language skill. A cohesive narrative is literally what separates a passing grade from true mastery.
So here is your mental scaffolding. To build that perfect narrative arc, we'll quickly cover defining the listening skill, its key characteristics, the importance of listening, classroom problems and solutions, and finally, top-down versus bottom-up processing.
Let's get right into Section 1, defining the listening skill, laying the theoretical foundation.
Okay, so listening is way more than just hearing sounds bouncing around a room. It's actually a highly active, multi-step cognitive process. When you write out your definition, you absolutely must emphasize these 5 specific sequential verbs: receiving, attending to, understanding, interpreting, and responding. It shows the examiner that listening is this end-to-end journey that only truly finishes when the listener actually reacts to the message. Oh, and definitely spend an extra sentence in your essay explaining why interpreting is often the absolute hardest step for learners. Taking raw vocabulary and trying to decipher a speaker's true intent, that requires some incredible mental agility.
To really ground your definition in the essay, contrast receptive and productive skills. Think about it. You simply cannot produce what you haven't received. Listening provides that essential foundational input, the vocabulary, the underlying grammar structures, those tricky nuances of pronunciation that makes productive skills like speaking and writing even possible. If the input isn't there, the output just isn't going to happen.
Moving on to Section 2, key characteristics of listening. What makes listening unique?
Group your first set of characteristics by hitting hard on the fact that listening demands intense, active mental involvement and laser focus to prevent total misunderstandings. It is never passive. Think about a student who is deeply focused on a teacher's lecture. They are actively decoding complex meaning, right? Whereas a distracted student just hears a wash of background noise. To give your answer more depth, point out how attention and concentration naturally flag over time. This is exactly why active listening is so incredibly taxing for non-native speakers. Their cognitive load gets completely maxed out. And importantly, it's purposeful. We listen for a reason, like catching a critical weather forecast right before a long road trip.
Then layer on those advanced characteristics. And here's where you can really make your essay shine with a real-world example. Take interpreting the tone behind the phrase, "That's great." Depending purely on intonation, that could mean genuine, thrilled happiness or total biting sarcasm. You also want to strongly emphasize that listening depends heavily on background knowledge. Honestly, if a student knows absolutely nothing about the topic of the audio, their linguistic skills alone aren't going to save them. They need context. Add in the fact that listening involves memory, like trying to follow multi-step instructions, and you've shown the examiner you fully grasp the deep psychological layers of this skill.
All right, Section 3, the importance of listening. Why this skill matters in ELT.
To snag those top marks, chunk the importance into 2 main themes. Start strong with the academic and language benefits. You have to emphasize that listening is the primary initial channel for language acquisition, especially in the early stages. Bring in a concrete example to really lock down your points. If a learner repeatedly hears a complex word like sustainable in a news broadcast, they aren't just memorizing it from a dictionary. They are learning its exact context and natural pronunciation, which directly leads to them confidently using it in their own speaking.
Next up, you want to elevate your essay from a standard run-of-the-mill textbook answer to a highly nuanced real-world analysis. Highlight the social and professional benefits. Show how good listening actively builds empathy, fosters deep trust, and drives workplace efficiency. By listening to international news or global podcasts, learners expose themselves to wildly diverse accents,
British, American, Australian, South African, which drastically improves their intercultural communication skills and ultimately sets them up for professional success in a globalized world.
That brings us to Section 4, Classroom Problems and Solutions, the Conflict and the Resolution.
Now, the source material throws about 15 distinct, separate problems at you, but trying to memorize a random list of 15 things, no way. That's a nightmare for you, and honestly, it's a nightmare for the examiner to read. So, make it intensely structured. Group them into 3 distinct categories: linguistic, psychological, and environmental. Doing this instantly makes your exam answer look highly analytical and deeply organized, proving you know how to categorize complex classroom dynamics.
Map specific linguistic problems directly to actionable classroom solutions. For example, let's say the barrier is a limited vocabulary, where a student completely misses a crucial sentence-altering word like significant. The concrete teaching solution there is keeping a dedicated vocabulary notebook and practicing learning words from the surrounding context. Or, if the stumbling block is connected speech, where the formal want to blends entirely into the informal wanna, the practical solution is using written transcripts right alongside the audio. That allows students to visually identify and dissect those rapidly linked forms.
Do the exact same thing for psychological and environmental barriers. If you really want to narrate this in detail and impress the examiner, dive deep into the psychological barrier of anxiety. Explain how the sheer terror of missing a single, solitary word can cause learners to completely panic, causing their cognitive load to crash and their listening skills to shut down entirely. The teaching solution? Implement relaxation techniques and low-pressure, ungraded tasks. And if the problem is a total lack of background knowledge, the educator's solution is previewing the topic, like thoroughly teaching the core concepts of greenhouse gases before ever pressing play on a complex 10-minute lecture about climate change.
And finally, Section 5. Top-down versus bottom-up processing, the cognitive climax.
So, how do learners actually unpack all that chaotic, rapid-fire language hitting their ears? Well, it happens in 2 completely different, highly specific ways. You must clearly contrast these 2 cognitive processes to show you understand how learners tackle incoming language from opposite directions. Top-down processing starts with a massive big picture and works its way downward. Bottom-up, on the other hand, starts with the absolute smallest individual building blocks, the minute phonetic sounds in isolated words, and painstakingly builds up.
Bring this complex cognitive theory down to earth with a vivid example. Imagine a stressed-out student hears the sentence, "Tomorrow will be cloudy with heavy rainfall." Even if that student completely misses the word cloudy because of a loud noise or lack of vocabulary, they use top-down context clues and their previous background knowledge of what a weather report sounds like to instantly know it's a forecast. They don't need to understand every single word to grasp the overarching meaning.
On the flip side, bottom-up processing demands that they decode every single word accurately. If a teacher stands at the front of the room and says, "Open your books to page 25, the student simply cannot just guess the context. They must hear 25 exactly. This is absolutely essential for following direct, strict instructions or taking down a critical telephone number or address where every single digit or letter matters completely.
And this totally highlights the crucial functional differences between the 2. Top-down processing is incredibly fast, rocketing learners toward a general, broad understanding because it relies so heavily on predicting based on past experience. Bottom-up is inherently slower and much more methodical. It's a highly analytical, step-by-step process meant for exact, detailed comprehension of vocabulary and grammar.
To wrap up your essay, you want to brilliantly synthesize these concepts. Prove to the examiner that these processes are complementary, not completely separate silos. Think about a stadium announcer declaring a football match is postponed due to heavy rainfall. A student uses bottom-up processing to recognize the specific individual vocabulary words over the loudspeaker. But they simultaneously use top-down processing to understand the broader context, that bad weather caused a major delay. They work together in perfect harmony.
So, with this masterclass framework deeply ingrained in your mind, from defining the skill, outlining its characteristics and importance, proactively solving classroom problems, right through to analyzing the cognitive processing models, you are fully equipped to walk into that exam room and perfectly execute any broad 10-mark question on the elements of listening. You're ready to absolutely crush it. But as you prepare, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. As an educator, are you just teaching your students to hear English, or are you truly giving them the tools to listen to the world?